Welcome back to the CTO Playbook, the podcast dedicated to helping CTOs excel. There's a reasonable instinct when a wave of change this size arrives to go deeper on the engineering, learn the tools, master the models, outbuild the change. My guest today thinks that instinct is quietly working against you. Natarajan has had a front row seat to every major platform wave since he helped found Travelocity back in 1995, before most people had heard the word internet. He has watched the internet arrive, then mobile, then cloud, and he'll tell you this one is bigger than all of them put together. What he has learned across those waves is that the CTOs who pull ahead are not the ones with the deepest technical mastery. They're the ones who understand the business well enough to know which problems are actually worth solving. We get into why and what it means for how we build a team. I'm your host, Adam Horner, CTO coach and founder of the CTO Playbook. Explore coaching, cohorts, and more resources at thectoplaybook.com. Now let's meet Nat and learn about his playbook. Nat, welcome to the CTO Playbook. It's absolutely fantastic to have you here.
Same here, Adam. I'm excited to be here.
Now, I've been looking forward to this conversation, not least because of your experience with building AI teams and what you've done. But for our listeners, it's probably a really good idea if you just give us a bit of an idea on some of the work that you do at the moment and kind of how you got to where you are, because I think it's a very interesting journey for everybody to learn from.
Happy to share, Adam. I've been fortunate. So I'm the Chief Operating Officer of GP Globalization Partners. So I lead the product engineering, IT security, and the sales and marketing team as well. And I'm old. I have been through many decades of changes in technology. I was one of the founding members of Travelocity.com when there wasn't a thing called the internet in '95. Since then, I spent a decade at PayPal, taking it from a smaller company to a multi-billion-dollar company with tens of millions of users and clients across the globe. Then I was at TurboTax. I was the chief product officer there, and the journey there was really how do you make taxes easy and can you do it on a mobile device? And that was a big sort of change. And so the internet was one such transformation that I saw. Had a front row seat into it. And then it was the mobile transformation. I saw some of it at PayPal, a lot of it when I was at TurboTax. And then I went to Ancestry as the chief product officer. And this was sort of a big data company in the guise of a genealogy company. Both are true. And that was the first time that we started using AI at scale. And I'll go through that in a second. And then, then I'm here. I've been here 5 years and really excited about what we've done here. We just launched a new AI product last year. We are enabling or making the whole company agentic. So I'm happy to share that experience. Specifically on the AI side, I think, it was in the PayPal days when we were looking at, we had all these hundreds of thousands of millions of transactions going through. How do you, parse through risk for it? And in those days, the early forms of AI were called machine learning. And how do you get machine learning? How do you use big data sets, and how do you use machines to figure out transactions and patterns and because they're much faster than human beings. So that's when we started. That's when I sort of started playing with it. And we started doing some of that with TurboTax, knowledge graphs. How do you look at knowledge graphs, and how do you have some machines read knowledge graphs and take all this complex IRS tax software? So that was what I learned in the TurboTax era. And in Ancestry really was the first time we started applying our own models. Right? I had a really strong team of AI engineers then. They used to be called data scientists and then engineers, and then they're called AI engineers. But this is all in the pre days before ChatGPT became a thing. And then we were looking at models, right? So my team came to me and said, Nat, we should figure out how we recognize handwriting for early French documents. I'm like, why the hell would we do that? Well, because Google doesn't do it. I'm like, really? Google should do it. That's their job. And then I figured out that Google doesn't care about, translating some of this into digitization. And it's important for our customers in those days. So they start working on models. You take a digital copy or photograph of a French record or a German record, and then how do you translate that handwriting into machine readable language, right? That's the models that they start working on. And they were very successful at it. I'll tell you one more story. The second thing they did was, at that time, we had about 500 million newspapers.com. And the best relationships, which is important for ancestry and genealogy, comes from obituaries.
Right.
because
So that's the list of where people die
right.
in this sort of newspapers and press. Yeah.
So someone died, and someone who's writing the obituary, you usually say, I'm the son of, the father of, the aunt of, the mother of, and that creates relationships. And those relationships are important for genealogy. So these people went and created a model, and it was fantastic. It was like close to 97% accuracy in those days. And we beat some of the models in those days from Amazon and Meta, who were doing some sort of image recognition stuff. So that was where I was dabbling with it. And what I learned from that Adam was, this is a powerful technology. Of course, it's even more powerful today, maybe 1,000 times, maybe more
Yeah.
than when we were doing our own models. But one has to think about it as what's the outcome that this is going to drive, and that's what has driven me my whole career. And then finally, I'll just stop with my journey here at GP. So we've been around 14 years. We have compliance data in close to 180 countries. We do business in 180 countries. So we have a lot of data that we've captured, right?
Yeah.
Rules-based data, best practices, legal data. And we were sitting on this, and I was putting the data together, and all of a sudden we discovered that we could create something of value, which is data-based, which is our own data, which doesn't exist anywhere in a single place. And that's what led to the birth of our AI product called GIA, which is an agentic HR agent, which can help you do things in 50 countries and 50 states. Create a document, figure out how to make a compliant US employment law work for someone in Singapore or work for someone in France, etc. So that's my journey, and a long one because I have been on this planet a little longer.
Than the average. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's some amazing experiences on the way through there, and probably helpful bit of context for those people who aren't quite as international. TurboTax, correct me if I'm wrong, is probably the single most widespreadly used tax submission software for US consumers, is it not?
It is. It is. I mean, when I was there, the market penetration was close to 80%. And we used to do, millions of taxes a year. And the most fun part of this business is it's an ultra seasonal business, right? So machines and AI and technology are very, very useful. When I was there, it was a $2.5 billion business, and we would make 90% of the revenue within 15 days of the year. So you can think
Right.
about scale and volume in a very short period of time. And I mean, I think I'm accurate, but the US tax code is probably one of the most complicated on the planet as well.
It's certainly one of the most complex that I've come across. I've lived in a few countries as well. So, but yes, and then also not only that, it's vast amounts of data. And as you say, it's compressed
Right.
into a very small window of time. And the amount of unique data you're looking at there is quite vast as well. Because I think that's something else that runs through your career is a lot of innate, what we call zero-party data that your companies have had access to, have owned, that hasn't existed elsewhere. And when you have that kind of scale, machine learning automation becomes the obvious solution because it really isn't a human scale way of dealing with some of that data at that scale. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, look, I mean, today, the reason why ChatGPT and deep learning and these models exist is because the internet has been around for more than 35, 40 years. And in those 35, 40 years, companies, public sites have collected data. And that data is the fuel for these models. And the models have gotten bigger because data exists, right? And now we live in a strange world where we have synthetic data, where AI is creating their own data to learn itself. So I think you're right. I think the journey, the evolution of AI has to be, closely collaborated or correlated to the rise
With
of
that data.
data,
Yeah.
digital data. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
Like, yeah, because you're talking about there about the optical character recognition of handwritten documents in multiple languages that predate any kind of technology at all. I mean, the
Right.
printing press was barely around when some of those things were written, of course. So unique handwriting, almost pretty much by the monk who was writing it out, because some of the only people who were writing back then. I mean, it's a very interesting approach to go for the data where you have access to a source. Thank you to the many churches and religious establishments that made all these records available. But they were pretty much the only ones. They had the monopoly on the data back then. But of course, now we can make it ubiquitous access to it in a whole new way. Now, one of the things that you've seen through that is you've been through several of these paradigm shifts, whether it was access to the internet at all, whether it was the mobile revolution, the big data, you've got the crypto, and now, of course, the transformers and the AI, with a whole bunch of others along the way as well. Now, what would you say is common to all of these sort of big changes and big revolutions when these new technologies come along? What is sort of the underlying thread that you've taken from each of these that's helped you in the current one?
So look, I have to say this current AI shift in technology is a tectonic shift. It's probably bigger than all the shifts I've seen with the internet, mobile, cloud. Right? You combine them all, and my where I sit today, I feel this AI shift is bigger than all of them put together. It has profound implications to the world, to the way we work, to the way we can literally leverage technology in a symbiotic way for human beings. So that's my belief. I think it's there for the good. A lot of people think of it as a doomsday scenario, but I feel it'll enhance human capabilities and possibilities in the future. So what's common? Right? That's a question that you asked in all these things. One is you need someone in the organization to recognize the future before it happens with these new technologies, because in most changes, changes I have been a part of, it's usually the 5 or 6% of the people in the organization who are saying, "Hey, we need to do something," and there's 95% of the people in the organization who are pushing against it. So who are like, "Hey, I don't know, it's not there. I don't believe it. Let's wait." Like so the best analogy is, who are the people who stand out, who are buying the next iPhone, right? Waiting the day it comes out. And
Yeah.
as a leader, am I paying enough attention to those people, or am I paying so attention to all the 95% of the people who are saying this is not going to work? I don't understand it. And this pattern is continuous. I saw this during the whole mobile era. There was a famous discussion between some of the leaders at TurboTax when I told them that you could do complex taxes on a mobile phone. They're like, "Nat, you're crazy. It's never going to happen," right? And then sure enough, we got more than 40% to do it the next tax season. Or the same thing with cloud. No, data is not secure. I need to have it in my own prem. And today, the biggest banks and the FBI and the CIA and all the intelligence agencies run in the cloud. So you need someone to see that, and you need to listen to that 5%.
Because a lot of the resistance that I see is not always active resistance. Sometimes it's just passive resistance. The sort of the wait and see can be almost as damaging as the person who digs their heels in and refuses to come forward.
100%. I look at the active 5%, right? They need another 10% to get over the tipping point. Many books
Yeah.
have been written about this, but I think really recognizing who they are in the organization, and sometimes they're not your most stellar talent.
They're just the ones who are forward leaning.
So you will see, hey, this is my best engineer. This is my best, product person. And they may not be the change agent that you need to go into the next phase. And that's just a contrary thinking, but that's what I have learned in this journey. The second thing is what is the will of the executive team? And it's very, very important. I think if there is no will at the top of the house, whether it's the board of directors, there's the CEO, the executive team, no matter how much someone below the organization pushes up, they're going to get a wall that they cannot cross over. So I think the
So there
will.
always needs to be that pull from some of the leadership then.
So the leadership has to pull, and the top leadership has to pull to demand change, to demand something which is different. And third, you got to bring the people along, right? Because a lot of time resistance is always about fear. I have done something a certain way, right? I've used the iPhone now for, I don't know, 15 plus years. All of a sudden, you want me to use a different interface? Well, I don't want to do it, right? So that's just human nature, right? If I come to England or some other place, I don't want to drive on the other side of the road. So it's just human resistance. So how do you make them feel comfortable? How do you train them? How do you wrap your arms around them to help them see a different path? And look, finally, if you're convicted about the change, people who are like, I'm not going to do this, I'm digging my heels into it. How do you give them a better place to go and work? So these are, and these are all consistent. I don't think they're any different in the AI era. I think these are all change related, sort of challenges, if you will.
Yeah. Interesting. The sort of the curve that people talk about is that sort of diffusion of innovation.
Yeah.
Where you go from the innovators, the early adopters, the early majority, which is a vast number of people, the late majority, which is an even bigger number of people, and then the laggards, the kind of people who won't put away their, previous version of the technology until it's actually not available anymore.
Right.
And they're sort of the bottom 10%. And that bottom 10% is the same size as the innovators and the early adopters put together. And it's that kind of, it's a vast range of people. Because I think one of the things that's been interesting recently is to see sort of the AI foundational models, sort of the leading models leaders, team saying things like, oh, well, maybe the world isn't going to change quite as quickly as we were saying before. And in the one hand, you can kind of be a bit skeptical and kind of go, yeah, well, before they were just doing sales. My view is very much like what you were just saying, is that they've sort of realized just how big that early and late majority are, and just how much effort you need to get them using a new paradigm, like AI, Gen AI particularly, that it's sort of an impact of reality almost. Do you see that in a similar kind of way?
Look, I do. I do think the world is a big place, and change when you live in the valley, you're in the middle of this. It's like, yeah, everybody should do this stuff, and then all of a sudden there's a big planet, 8 billion, close to 8 billion people, and they do certain things in certain ways. And I'll just share this story with you. I think when I was at PayPal, we found a paper that was written in 1976 by the Treasury Department that by the end of the decade is their prediction, paper currency would be dead. It was written in 1976, and we are in 2026 today, and paper currency and coins are still alive in the whole world.
With a small exception of a few countries. I mean, I'm in Sweden. I've been living in Sweden for 7 years, and I think I've once seen a paper note. But even Sweden is pushing to bring cash back, making sure that cash must be accepted in a number of places. So yes, very interesting. We're talking 50 years there of a prediction that still hasn't come true. That seems logical.
Look, I mean, when you're there, it doesn't seem logical, right? You're like, how can this be? This is a faster way. This is a cheaper way. This is a better way, and that's what people in AI will tell you today, and they're right. But the adoption and the change and the behavior will take a while. Now, the first billion users on OpenAI happened. I don't know the exact number, but I think it happened in a matter of months. So that adoption curve is also being accelerated significantly because of the proliferation of technology. Everybody's got some sort of internet connectivity or a mobile device or a laptop or something like that. And so the adoption is also accelerating. So I don't think it'll take another 50 years before AI becomes real, right? But will every part of the world use it quite the same way? No, there will be some people who will be, I think you asked me for a playbook. If you're not AI first going forward, you are dead as a company, right? So I think that's my sort of prediction. If you are not AI literate, you are not relevant.
And that's sort of playing out in a number of places. And I think just 2 years ago, that would have been relatively controversial. I think now that's almost accepted. That's almost a default position, I think. Quite rightly, I agree with you completely. What do you think are the key sort of signs that you've been looking at that brings you to the conclusion that is not only obvious but inevitable?
Let's start with the money, right? There is vast amount of money being poured into this across the world, and it's almost like it's too big to fail at this point. I've not seen this kind of energy in companies, and I sit on two public company boards. I interact with a lot of founders in the Valley and elsewhere, and everybody has a roadmap for AI. They're doing something with it. They're experimenting. They're not seeing the results. Not all of them are seeing the results just yet, but they're investing it in it quite in a significant, deliberate way.
Yeah.
Third, I do think the AI first or AI native companies, they are really pushing the edges of what is possible. And I'll give you an example of one founder that I met. He has a small company. 6 months back, he had zero revenue. Within 6 months, he has gone to $10 million worth of ARR. He has AI agents that go and help with reconciling invoices. And he has 6 engineers, and he has close to 50 agents who work for him every day. From the time that he hears what a customer wants to when he implements that capability, it is less than 9 hours.
Phenomenal pace compared to what's historically been the norm.
So, I was born in the days of waterfall, where it would take you 18 months, 3 years, projects would fail. Then came the agile phase. Okay, can we do something in a month? And then now it's 2 weeks. But he's doing it in 9 hours.
9 hours.
And he's gotten to $10 million of ARR in 6 months, right? So the pace of adoption across the world and what incredible productivity gains that he's getting are something that every company wants and wants to adopt. So I think it's a combination. The money, the interest and attention to it, and really the people pushing real use cases. So it's not like the 90s and saying, hey, we had all these pet.com failures or the .com failures. I think people are actually getting to real productivity. It's cheaper to take an idea to execution today than it was, 20 years back.
Even 2 years back.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not necessarily going to remain the case or stay even if we begin to see huge demand and a constraint on the availability of compute and so on. But I think it's a very good indication. And I think it's quite relevant that people are sort of struggling to find their recent, as in the last 30, 50 years, comparison. Like you were saying, it's the biggest thing that you've seen happen in your working lifetime. And people sort of going, economists, for example, are going back sort of to the railroad revolution to find something that is of an equivalent scale to look at in terms of both investment from the point of view of the percentage of the overall economy, the amount of impact that it eventually had, even if it wasn't all immediate, but unfortunately also the amount of money that was lost through that process from investment that didn't quite work out. The experimentation cost, if you like, was also extremely high for the railroad. But I think that's a fairly good indicator that it's here to stay, and that the impact is real and being felt already. From the technology perspective, then, now, because you're coming from the point of view where you're covering quite a lot of areas, right? You everything from operations through to deep engineering, product, and all the bits in between. Is engineering one of the biggest impacted parts of the organization from your perspective, or are there other parts of the organization that are getting an equivalent or equal boost to productivity, to impact, to effect?
Look, so I'll talk about GP here for a second. We are not a small organization, completely global. We have 1,000 plus people in 50 countries. So we're not small. We're not big either. We're not, but we are reinventing our entire company to be based on AI. So whether it's our finance team, our legal team, our HR team, our operations team, so I'm reinventing that completely. The areas that most people pick, which are easier sort of places, is one, certainly productivity with engineers. What are the tools out there? Can you make them more productive? Because we now live in a world where you don't need engineers to write software. You need engineers to figure out what to do for customers, right? So it's a shift in how you're utilizing resources. Secondly, same thing with customer service, right? A lot of time the agents speaking to customers are trying to get information, data, knowledge to help somebody. And that gathering of information and that data and knowledge is almost instantaneous now. And it can happen through different agents out there. But the same thing is true for finance. The same thing is true for HR. The same thing is true for legal. So I think we feel we are reinventing the entire company to be AI first, to be agentic first. And I don't think it is only an engineering transformation. A lot of companies will start there because the engineers have the propensity to experiment. But I do believe that the organizations which will thrive in the future are the ones who reinvent business processes for their entire operation to be agentic.
So the CTO coming out of engineering and helping to apply, because I'm increasingly seeing that it is the CTO whose job is seen as being the one to be the main proponent for AI, especially in the leadership team, but also across the business. So from what you're saying then, getting the CTO to step out of just engineering, out of just product, and try and help apply it across the entire business layer are going to be the ones who are going to be the difference between the winners and the losers then. I mean, that certainly seems to be the bet you've taken with GP.
They are best positioned to do it. But I have a realization that a CTO will not be able to transform the business. The CEO has that opportunity. Only the CEO has that opportunity. So how do you influence the CEO to understand AI, right? So our founder, Nicole Sahin, has been in the job 14 years. She's an amazing lady, hugely entrepreneurial. So she wanted me to take this role on primarily because she saw that, what I'd done with engineering and product teams, we need to apply this to the whole company. So she made a structural shift so that she could enable GP to be agentic first. So you need a visionary like that to figure out the structures don't work. If you're a CTO, you have certain jobs, and all of a sudden, if you go and push on a use case, which is sales and marketing, you're going to get a lot of pushback unless the CEO and the board are demanding it. And then the enabler of that becomes, your head of engineering, your CTO, your CIO, whoever that is, or your chief chief digital officer, right?
Absolutely. So going back to what we said at the beginning, you need to have the pull from the top, but also then the push and the support to be able to go across the organization.
Now, one other playbook thing I'll share with you is, so my whole career, my mentors have been more experienced than me in some aspect that I want to learn. And in this phase, I'm finding that my mentor is a 28-year-old engineer.
It's an amazing role reversal then.
And it's an amazing role reversal. I mean, they think differently. They bring insights differently. Now, they don't have the experience I do, but they influence the way I think about AI significantly, because I would not be able to think about it, I mean, that way. So I think that's a playbook thing. I think if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking about AI, who is your mentor? Is it someone more experienced than you, or is someone who's younger than you? And I found that to be more effective for me.
Why is that, do you think?
I think they have no constraints. They start from scratch. My son is 27, and my younger son is 24, and they don't believe there was a world before the internet.
So in some ways, those of us who are carrying loads and loads of experience, we're also carrying baggage with that, expectations with that aren't necessarily useful.
And well, they were useful. I mean, not anymore. And a 21-year-old engineer coming out of any school or college today has already used AI tools. You don't have to convince them that you can use a Copilot or a Cursor or one of these things so you don't have to write software. You don't have to convince them.
They don't need to question it at all. It's just inherent for them.
So it's a big role reversal, and I think we are learning to work through that because it's challenging, as you can imagine.
Absolutely. And so as you build your team together and you've got these people who are inspiring you and leading you from a different, younger set of experiences, how do you put together a team then that helps to drive the whole organization forward in the way that you're looking for, and to generate that value that your CEO knows, has that instinct that is there to be uncovered, untapped?
Look, that's the art of innovation, right? I wish it was easy, but if you go and type innovation, you'll probably get, between innovation and leadership, that's the most amount of hits you'll get on Google, I think. So what I've learned is you have to have a little bit of every skill, right? If you're a complete startup today, you can adopt these skills and you can do things at a clip which is unheard of. If you're an established organization, real customers, real people, real money, real growth, then you need someone who will find ways to take the organization and people along the journey, right? You cannot rip and replace. Sometimes you can, but most times that's not a sustainable effort. So you need people with that experience of saying, how do I lead this change? How do I transform, right? How do I bring people along? How do I bring people who have younger experience but don't have this sort of transformation experience? So bringing a diverse set of people to the table is important. Secondly, as a leader of that organization, making sure that you're paying attention, what's the right word? Outsized attention to these people who don't have organizational influence. So you can bring that to the organization and ensure it happens. That's your job as a leader, right? And I'll share the story, which is probably dated. When NASA, went to the moon for the first time, there was an engineer, it's a well-written story, who wrote to the administrator of NASA. And I think there were close to 1 million people working on this, right? So he was really at the bottom of the totem pole and said, the way you're designing the lunar module is going to fail. The only way for it is to land in reverse. Now, it had to go through thousands, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people before it got to the NASA, administrator at the time. But he paid attention to it. He went and listened to it, and they changed the whole design based on this one engineer. So that's what one has to do. You got to have your ears to the ground and really find ways to have the right signal at the right places so you can influence this whole transformation.
And it's something that I've heard quite a few times, that a lot of the time success comes from structured evolution rather than destructive revolution. The rip and replace is kind of the destructive revolution, whereas that sort of managed evolution, as you say, trying to pick the right bits to overhaul the previous stuff in a way that is actually A, going to work, right? But B, that actually has a chance of being listened to, having a chance of success. So for you, that's the leadership aspect of the innovation.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And look, it's also courage, right? And you see it at all, because there's a high chance of failure. it's not guaranteed to succeed, right? So one has to be comfortable with, hey, you know what, this did not work. So in this organization, in this particular transformation, it did not work. So what can we learn from it? So I think creating an organization where failure is okay, but not learning is not, that I think is a persistent pattern that will guarantee you success.
That's amazing, because I think that really fits well with some of the writings of people like Eric Ries, the validated learning concept, where you've got to try things. You've got to be not scared of failing in order to have the courage to try things in the first place. But then when things fail, learning from the failures in order to create the best one, the best next step. Because I find like one of it, I think it was Bill Gates who said it, success doesn't teach you so much, failure teaches you so much more.
Yeah, that's right. That's
And
right.
so in some of your approaches there, what have been some of the sort of the most validating learnings that you've had on the journey to putting the team together, the approach together that you have now at GP? Which are the things that sort of steered the direction you've gone, as well as clearly listening to people who are the change makers, taking the courage, the courageous decisions at the right time. What are some of the other key things that have steered the direction you've taken GP in?
So look, GP, we've been very fortunate that Nicole started this business and it had so global imprint, and we had this treasure trove of data which we were able to harness earlier on, right? Second, I think it's bringing people around you who want to do this, right? So you got to attract the talent, right? It's not, and you got to want people to want to go on this journey. Not everybody wants to go and climb a mountain, right? But then you got to find people who are like, you know what, we have never done this before, let's try it. And I know you have my back, so I'll go and see if I can fail or how far I can go before I fail. So how do you create that kind of an environment for your whole team? One, so selecting the right people. Not everybody, has to be new. Like you said, it's not a rip and replace. When you come into an organization, you got to figure out who are the star players. How do you get them to the next spot? How do you bring in the talent that you need? And then creating really an ecosystem where people are taking risks. People can take risks and they don't feel threatened by sort of taking that risk. I think secondly, someone called, we had a large town hall in India last year, and someone said something that I've not heard about myself. They said that you are unreasonably reasonable.
You've got to explain that one.
So I think because I set really, big goals and I'm pushing the teams to get there. And then when they don't get there, then I become reasonable as, okay, what did we learn? So we got 65%. So now let me set the next big goal. So I keep pushing the teams forward towards achieving big things. And even if they don't achieve 100% of this, we have achieved way more than they have imagined. Right.
I love that, because it sort of strikes well with this message I've been saying for a long time, is that we need to celebrate the wins. And it sounds as though when you have a near win, you still celebrate, which I think is something that a lot of leaders kind of forget to do. And so by the sounds of it, the what was it? Unreasonably reasonable. It sounds like it sort of encapsulates that as well.
The one thing I will say is the only thing which is not acceptable to me is if we don't meet a certain goal, an objective, a milestone, whatever it is, if one cannot tell me why, and there's learnings associated with this, then is when I get unreasonable. I'm like, I just will not accept it, because let's learn. What did we learn? Why didn't we get here? What failed? And it's not the failure, but what's the learning that we won't repeat going forward?
I think that's the key bit, isn't it? So that we don't repeat it the next time.
Look, these are simple principles, extremely hard to do, as you know.
Yes, but this is the joy of it, though, isn't it? Because it's easy to say, but not simple to do.
Yeah.
We're all in the goal of trying to make life simple for our customers. But if simple was easy, there'd be a lot more people in this game. Now, what I want to do then is to sort of begin to wrap up and come to the playbook that we've been sort of talking about and skirting around all the time here, is sort of name the 4 key things that we've been sort of talking about as we go along. So the first one we want to talk about is the major shift, the macro shift, if you like. Just how big do you feel as though this shift is compared to the previous ones we've had?
In my career, this is the biggest shift I have seen, and it's tectonic, right? I think it is completely tectonic. It's going to change the way human beings experience life. And one thought that the mobile device did that. One thought the internet did that. I think this will have a more profound more profound than all these things combined.
Yeah, my view, very similar, I think, is that it's going to affect sort of consumer life, everyday life, and it's going to affect business life. And there's been very few major innovations in the past that have done that thoroughly. And I have a feeling that this is one of those technologies that's going to do that as well.
Here's a dream that I have for this technology. I think there is a world when, 20, 25 years from now, when I'm maybe weak or a little older, I have a robot at home who's taking care of me.
A robot rather than people then. Interesting.
I mean, because that's something which it's hard in a lot of the developed world to have assistance. It's expensive. This will be a much more cheaper way of enhancing my life, right, or my lifestyle at a different stage. So it'll have a profound impact, I think, on the older generation.
And to get to that, there's quite a significant sort of change. There's got to be multiple innovations to get to there. So clearly, if you're looking at that kind of time frame, which in the grand scheme of things is not that far away, we're thinking it was.
And look, the other playbook is, so if you have these, autonomous systems which are thinking and doing stuff for you, the guardrails are equally important. And I know there've been a lot of talk about AI, ethics in AI, right? But then, we in GP, we ground ourselves in compliance in 180 countries, right? So we are helping, already shaping some guardrails for these agents. Who has privileges? We have sensitive information. Who can see it? Who cannot see it? So these things are usually ignored, right? When you're going through this innovation cycle, we take it seriously because we are, at the end of the day, compliance business. But I do believe that agentic solutions will have to start putting these guardrails up front and center while they're building and then scaling to these different ideas.
And I think that's been one of the interesting differences between sort of the frontier AI models and the companies that run them in terms of how important they believe guardrails, constraints, rules, restrictions are versus each other. So it's a very interesting insight. The second big topic we came across really is the technology itself, just how much of a difference this is. And you just mentioned the sort of the views you have of what you'd like to see happen. And so therefore the technology itself needs to be quite different. The collapse of the cost of the technology is something that I think is changing significantly. Just take us through a little bit about your view on that part of it now.
Yeah, look, we are in 2026. A lot of so prominent CTOs have run out of budget in the first quarter because people are spending too much on tokens. So it's so interesting to see what will happen to the cost of all this. But look, like with any commodity, it's going to come down, right? I think the models are going to become commodity, and I think the layers that are on the top of the model are the ones which are going to start commanding a different experience. But and then today, I think there are some so calculations would say that an agent is more expensive in certain cases than a human being. So is it really worth it or not? So in this time of debate on cost, and will it really come down or is it going to accelerate with technology? I think one thing has always been sure: people find ways to make it cheaper and faster and better. And I have no doubt in my mind that's going to happen here as well. A mobile call used to cost you, hundreds of thousands of dollars for the first call. And today we don't pay for it.
That's a really, really good comparison. I like that because it's really crystal clear. Talking about all the technology and that side of it, the flip side, the other side of it is the people, the team that we use, how we structure it and put it together. How are you thinking about the way that we put the team together to work on this, to deliver it, to bring about that value?
I really believe in this augmented world where, AI agents are augmenting human beings. And I think it's a combination of the two which make our customers' lives better, our businesses more profitable, and we create new things in the world, right? GP, we have people in our business. We have people in 50 countries, and in addition to that, we have this amazing AI-based technology. So we are enabling our teams to leverage this technology to help our customers. So I think the combination, it's not a replacement, it's a combination of these two, which is what will make a differentiator in the world. Someone coined this, I did not, but it was like, software as a service was a thing, but now it's services as software, right? So it's almost like people are outsourcing the whole service to a company, and some of it is done by technology, some of it is done by people. But the combination is really, really powerful. because you can do a
Right.
lot more, a lot quicker, a lot more accurately, and we can do that. I mean, we have seen with Gia and some of our AI agents in our EOR platform, people need to talk to people less, and their information that they get is much more accurate, right? And we give compliance, I mean, information and feedback with Gia, and we are comfortable saying it's verified by us. So if you find a mistake in the data, right, you can hold us accountable for it. How many companies say that? Right. So, but it's because we have this human in the loop while we have this data and we have this technology. So the combination really makes us confident about it.
Right. So it's a blend of the people and the technology, the data together, which is the key thing that creates the value out of the team from your perspective.
That's right.
And then finally, we've spoken a lot about leadership and the value of leadership in the transformation, but also in the decision-making process as well. And I think, I mean, more than ever, it's clear that to be a great leader, whether you're a CTO, COO, CEO, you need to understand the business orientation. How important do you think it is for CTOs in particular to get closer to the business, to the numbers?
Look, the best innovation happens when there's a zero gap or layer between the problem that a customer is trying to solve and the person who's trying to solve it. So, I mean, my whole career, I've been trying to get that to as minimal layers as possible. So, I think to the extent that people who understand the customer problems can create an idea and solve it themselves, right? That's the fastest. That's what my friend who was telling you, between idea that a customer gave him and implementation was 9 hours. So the time period is so shortened, right? So I think with this new world, it doesn't have to be a technologist only creating, or solving problems. It could be anybody in the business. It's at their fingertips, right? I have many people within my organization who are lawyers and salespeople who are using Gemini gems today to go and automate jobs for them, and they haven't been trained. They're not script writers, they're not engineers, but they're using it to actually augment their work today. So you think about, 5 years from now, you will have someone who understands a business problem, and so the execution of that is almost instantaneous with these technologies that we have. So I think everybody becomes a business owner in this case, right? So the lines of I'm a technologist, I'll solve the technology problem. You're a business person, you solve the business problem. You're a customer person, you go and help the customer. I think that those lines are blurring quite significantly, and so collapsing into who can really have critical thinking, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you didn't ask this question, but the other playbook that I see going on is you need to not solve for technical skills anymore. Technical skills are a commodity.
Yeah.
The agents are going to do it. You need critical thinking. What is the problem to solve? How do I leverage this autonomous agentic system to solve them? But the North Star is, am I solving something which is impactful to the customer and to the business? And do I have the judgment to figure what's the difference between the two?
And I think that's the key thing. Having a North Star that's as clear as that is, from my perspective, that it's essential. If you start from there, everything else that you said all falls into place. And in some ways, it's almost inevitable, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's that's what differentiate. Some of the most successful entrepreneurs on this planet, especially on the tech side, they are geeky for sure, but they are solving real problems.
Yeah.
They really embed themselves in those real problems, right? And so I think the more we can emulate of that, saying it's not just for sort of technology's sake, but what is it we're really after?
Excellent. Now, it's been absolutely wonderful to go through that with you. Thank you very much for your time, your experience. One of the questions I love asking my guests towards the end is, if you were talking to a CTO who's very recently come into the role, whether they've got lots of experience or they've got little experience, but just recently become a CTO, what would you say is the one most important thing that they need to do or think about in order to succeed?
Well, I think it's a big job, so there's probably more than one thing that you need to be successful. I think the one thing I would say is, are you paying close attention to what the board, the CEO is asking you to accomplish? And is it aligned to which objective of the company that is visible? And if you don't know that, you should ask it. You should not take the job until you have clarity on that.
Clarity and alignment, two of my favorite words. Nat, thank you very much. How can people get hold of you if they want to continue the conversation with you?
Well, I can be reached at nat@g-p.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me. I'm on LinkedIn. So I look at LinkedIn very, very frequently, and I'm sure Harper can give additional contacts as needed.
Excellent. So we'll put a couple of those links into the show notes at the end. Nat, thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. It was a pleasure. You brought out things that were in my experience, and I really enjoyed it.
Excellent.
Thank you for listening to the whole episode. I appreciate your time. So just before you go, I'd like to ask you for a favor in return for putting together this episode of the CTO Playbook for you. Please share the episode with just one person who will appreciate it. Wherever you're listening, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or another platform, sharing the episode will help more CTOs find the podcast and enable me to create more great content. Remember that you can find more information on the CTOplaybook.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of the CTO Playbook.